Word.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Big Blingy What is the opening of this show. This is WeatherBrains episode number 466. This is the pre-show. This is the annual year-ender. It's an exciting show we do every year. This is the pre-show. We share boring personal stories and humorous anecdotes. So, Brian, go ahead. The floor belongs to you.
I don't have any personal anecdotes.
Well, you were talking when the show started, so, I mean, you were talking about blingy something.
Well, we came up with a show title before we even turned this show on, so I was trying to get the last word. It was big, blingy, something or other.
Blingy chain thing.
That was it.
I forgot.
Yeah.
That was it. Okay, so there's...
And again, for those that are watching here via live or by replay, we are doing this at a strange time, and we are in strange places. Strange people. So
speak for yourself. Speak for yourself. We're all in our normal places. You're the one who's strange.
Well, no. I mean, Rick is in a new place there, and
that's true. Yep.
And I'm in a new place. I am in my home office, which, by the way, is much more luxurious than the closet where I work at the television station.
Absolutely. I've never seen your home office, but your closet is really a mess. It's small.
It's bad. It's horrible. But when I'm home, I get the good snacks here. You know.
Ooh. Some Nick Saban material there.
I mean, let me tell you what. I'm addicted. I could suck these things down all day long. So. But we're going to start the show here in about 6 minutes, and I'm just excited. Greg Carbon is on the show. So, Greg, are you and Rick like so close you could scream at each other?
Actually, I'm home. Rick's at the office. I took this week off. I've got my mom is visiting for the holidays. The boys are. One boy is home from school. The other one is coming up today, and we're just doing the Christmas thing and having a relaxing week here. So,
but if he were at the office, I could scream at him.
It's just the high point of my week.
Yeah, this is the pinnacle. It gets no better than coming on WeatherBrains on Christmas Eve. And for those of you watching again live, this show is going to be released into the wild, the audio podcast on December 29th. But you get it early because you're in the video crowd here. But this will run on cable television on December 29th. It'll be released as a podcast on the 29th. But for the world here, it's the watching on the video side, the YouTube side, they can watch it now.
Uncut and not rated.
So we are missing Nate.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you want me to set this to air on the 29th or the 30th? Because if we recorded it on the 29th, it would air in the morning of the 30th.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. We're going to release it in the late night of the 29th or the early morning of the 30th. You're correct, sir.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, at the exact same normal release time in the pre-dawn hours on Tuesday of next week. And the reason we're doing this is vacation schedules, and that it's that time of the year. So we're missing Nate, and I think that's the only party. And Kevin's not here.
Aubrey.
Aubrey.
Yeah, she said she can't make the show, and what is going on with Radar Scope? A server with the specified host name could not be found.
North Korea.
So WDT's exactly North Korea. So WDT, that's a Rick and Greg thing. It's like in Oklahoma somewhere. I don't know where their server is, but aren't they based in Norman now? WDT.
Yeah, they're in a building across the courtyard
right across
there
the parking lot. Yeah.
Over there and bang on their door and see if anybody's there and tell them something's awry.
Mine's working fine, James.
Yeah, I was just checking mine here.
It says I've had some people on Twitter comment on it. If you are, of course, you can receive the data from different sources, and it depends.
That's true.
On the
My
source.
data comes from Allison House. True. That's true.
Right. If you're using the high res or super res product from WDT, that's what's down. If you use Allison House or NOAA, it's fine. So something's going on over there. Actually, it just updated, so it's been coming and going. But yeah, I don't know if it's going to rain a drop at Brian's house or my house with this big storm cluster coming through here.
It's really dark outside, but because my window faces north, and so the cells moving by just I mean, it's missed me. I'm not going to get any rain out of this, so.
I'm gonna get it though. I'm in Trussville, so it's gonna hit me.
Yeah, you're going to get it.
Just had a tweet about roads flooded in Inslee.
I wouldn't be surprised. That looks like pretty heavy rain.
Yeah.
But again, this is elevated, so we're not at risk of me and Brian running away during the show and doing tornado coverage. And naturally, we're short-staffed in that our one of our Mets has the flu, which is always special.
Oh, yes.
So, Brian, you and me, pal, we're working tonight, man. We're taking this thing. We got it.
Yep. You got it.
We're doing the television side, and typically we put Brian out in the world, in the real world, in the Jeep, and Charles Daniel would come in and work with me, but Megan is with the flu, so Charles is going to work his regular shift tomorrow. All right, it's 10 o'clock on the nose. Let me throw out a
Wow. We're
quick
starting on
link or two
time.
here. Thanks for the graphic, Greg. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you, Greg. That's wonderful. I did
problem.
erase the time and date though because
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I put that date.
Yeah.
Actually, I had mentioned the 29th on some talks, but
yeah, I just erased that bottom line so
no
and
problem.
clipped or cropped it.
So, Greg, is that Niagara Falls in there? One of those images?
You're right. It is. It's early January. Yep.
Wow.
Hey, to all you WeatherBrains folks, we're up to 56 subscribers.
That's not bad.
Very cool.
All right, let's get
Considering
this
it's only
sucker
been out there 24 hours.
going. Let's get this sucker going. I don't know where Nate is. I will. Usually, if they don't get
blast.
they'll send me a note. And Kevin, but it's time. And again, I will be somewhat hit and miss with the weather. So let me hit record number 1 and record number 2, and here we go.
Kevin just sent a note. He's out.
Okay, he's out. Okay, I got you. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains! Yes, indeed. WeatherBrains episode number 466. This is for December 29th, 2014. It is the annual year-ender. I love this show. Favorite show of the year. We talk about the big events of 2014. And I must tell a little secret. Should I let the world in on this?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. What is it?
We're not recording the show on the 29th. We're actually recording the show on the 23rd. So it's a shock. But see, we are open here. We're transparent.
We're transparent.
We disclose everything. We just raise our skirt to the world, which can be really dangerous.
Speak for yourself.
No, we've got we've got Christmas vacation schedules and all that, so we're knocking this thing out a couple of days before Christmas. So hopefully we're not going to have a catastrophic weather event in the last week of December to throw this thing off course. But anyway, we've got some of our astute regulars here and a very special guest we'll introduce here in just a second. Brian Peters is the internationally beloved meteorologist. And by the way, for those watching and not listening, a lot of us are in different places. This is my home office. I actually have room to breathe in here. It does not look like the Turkey Creek landfill, and we have cool snacks like this.
All right.
You should have to share, man.
Yeah, Brian is always in his luxurious home office. So, Brian, what do you want for Christmas?
Messy.
I'm going to say, by now Christmas is over, but what do you think you're going to get for Christmas? You're a predictor, you're a forecaster.
I have them.
Oh,
It's my tickets.
Me
My
too.
tickets to the Rose Bowl. So I have my Christmas present already. I hate to say it isn't wrapped up under the tree, but I'm sorry, but.
So Mr. Rose Bowl is going to Pasadena to watch his Florida State Seminoles take on the Oregon Ducks. Yep,
Yes, it's going to be
good
duck
football.
soup for supper.
Yep. You know, our son, our youngest son, who's a high school senior, he drove to Cincinnati to watch the Bengals and the Broncos play on Monday Night Football. They enjoyed a great game up there.
That was a great game.
Yeah, and he likes the Bengals, and the Bengals won the game, so they're very happy, but they'll be driving back today in a quagmire. That voice heard was Dr. John Scala. John, how's the Pack doing?
We got a big game coming up on Sunday. It is for all the marbles in the Northern Division at the NFC. So they're playing Detroit at home, and of course, a couple of weeks ago, I agreed to work that shift on Sunday. So I've got to get. I'm going to have all the plasma screens set up in the studio, and they'll pump in that game, and I'll just be in there having a party by myself.
Yeah, John's going to be over there in the green chroma key wall. Instead of turning around and looking at himself with the maps, he'll be looking at the Packers on television.
That's right.
I know how that works. He's so good, he doesn't need any stinking monitor on the key wall. We've got Bill Murray, who's back. Bill, welcome back to the show after a week of hiatus there for you.
At what point, James, do you stop sending invitations again? Since I didn't get an invitation this morning, I figured if you missed like 6 shows in a row or something, you don't get an invitation anymore.
We had a problem with the last show. We had to refire invitations about 5 or 6 times to get everybody here, but it is working. And we also have Rick Smith. Rick is in different digs. He's at the Weather Service at the Worldwide Weather Headquarters there.
The Weather Palace, the Weather Mecca. It has different names, but yeah, I'm came into the office for a little while this morning and thought we'd try the setup here. So this is my palatial office here in the National Weather Center.
You know, it almost looks like we have the same lightning picture on the wall. I'll show you mine here before the show is over. But anyway, I'll tell you what, Bill, you take it over, bring in Greg, and let's do it. This is the year-ender. We're going to talk about the big events of 2014.
Yeah, this is absolutely, to echo what you said earlier, James, this is my favorite show of the year, and of course we always look forward to having Greg, and we're lucky to get him on today. Of course, he is the Warnings Coordination Meteorologist at the Storm Prediction Center, which is busy this morning issuing watches for our area. Greg Carbon, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks, James, Rick, John. Good to see you guys. Brian. I am not at work. I'm home. So, but I am watching. The tornado watch is out, and we'll see how things evolve. Hopefully, not too bad today. Nothing. Hopefully, nothing too drastic because the year in review list is pretty much done. And I don't want to make any amendments to it. So. We'll go with it.
Yeah, let's don't have any last-minute changes. Let's don't make this like a baker's dozen or something, Greg. That's what we don't need down here today. So you work on that.
I'll do what I can.
Greg will let you take it away and share with us your meteorological memories of 2014.
Well, this is a
Hey, Greg, this is really the Greg Carbon Show.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, where's my banner at the bottom of the screen? All you guys got these nice banners. I have to make one here. So.
Yeah, you have to, everybody talk amongst yourself while Greg makes him a lower third.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of background. So, yeah, the year in review talk is something that I've been doing now for about a dozen years, and started with a request to visit the AMS chapter up in Omaha, Nebraska, back in December of '03, I guess it was, and I was trying to figure out a topic for their year-end meeting, their year-end dinner meeting, where there would be not just meteorologists but spouses of meteorologists, and so I wanted to make a talk that was perhaps understandable, not so technical. And I came up with this idea of, well, I'm just going to look back over the past year and develop a list of memories. These are my memories. Your mileage may vary, as I say, and that's my disclaimer. I'm not ranking them. This is not an official ranking on the part of NOAA, my employer, or anything like that. They're just interesting events that have occurred over the past year, and we'll tell a little story about all of them. But before we go, any questions on that? Guess not. No? All right. You want me just to do it then, huh?
Yeah, we're ready for some memories. Let's go.
All right. All right.
Go for it.
And again, I'm going to present them in roughly chronological order here. In the presentation that I give, there's about 4 or 5 slides of information, so there's a lot more visual content in the live presentation that I give. But I'll go through what I've got for the list. So number 1 for 2014, and again, chronologically speaking, was January of 2014, the beginning of the year, almost a year ago. Started out quite chilly, and John Scala had noticed on the slide there, the title slide, there's a picture of the frozen Niagara Falls, which was taken in January of last year, or the beginning of this year. If you remember correctly, much of the nation was locked in some very cold Arctic air, And this is really part of a larger scale pattern, which actually has still shown tendencies to reappear throughout the year. An anomalously large ridge of high pressure along the western portion of North America. Downstream from that anomalous ridge, you have northwest winds through a deep layer of the atmosphere, bringing much colder air to parts of the central United States, Great Lakes, and even the southeast. And so this was the deep cold that was in place, and also played a role in the Dixie winter weather woes that occurred during the late part of January 2014. I did a little analysis on temperatures using the North American Regional Reanalysis data set, which is about as close to truth. It's not truth, but it's about as close to truth as you can get for surface temperatures. And if you look at the long-term record back to 1979, you've got 36 years of data to work with there. Cold January mornings are less common in the most recent 18 years of the record when compared to the first 18 years of the record. And so I went into a little detail on that in my presentation. And I have the statistics to show that over the continental United States, that it was the first January since 1997, I believe, that had 4 mornings during the month that were in the lowest 5% of cold mornings back to 1979. So these things seemed unusual at the time, and they were, even more so because we had not experienced cold Januaries like that for quite some time. So a memorable month of January was my event number 1. Any questions on that one? And we all know you suffered greatly.
For a lot of us, Greg, we don't like to talk about January. That was an unmitigated disaster.
Yes.
So
Yes.
my eyes twitching, and I'm having these bad memories, some flashbacks.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to bring that on.
Except, Greg, I have a fond memory. I drove 1,000 miles in the 2 storms in a 4-wheel drive storm chaser. So
all right,
I got around just fine, and I only went into the ditch 7 times, and that was on purpose because of all the other idiots who were out there on the highway and were blocking the roads to get by. I had to go into the ditch, but 4-wheel drive made it just fine.
There are many stories to be told, and maybe even a baby boom. Has anybody looked into that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's another climatology. We won't go there right now. Okay, number 2 was the California drought nightmare, which actually is continuing. Quite a remarkable long-term climate event throughout the year. Really got started in 2013, but came on with a vengeance in early 2014. And in fact, for the 12-month period ending February 2014, it was the driest 12 months on record for the state of California. And it only got worse from there. And I used the city of Fresno climate record to show how bad it was throughout the year. And in fact, I believe Fresno, along with other locations in Central California, is on track to have one of its hottest years on record. And of course, we know that climate signal that you see in drought tends to exacerbate the high temperature record. The soil is essentially dry, so your nighttime temperatures don't get as low, and your daytime temperatures can boost even higher during the warm season. And this is a vicious cycle. There was some recent relief in California with a couple of major storms, which is good. They need the snowpack in the sea. It's not area burn scars and so dry. Be quite a few problems with debris flow and mudslides. So that was number 2, and that'll be a continuing story. Number 3 was the Western Atlantic cyclone bomb, and this one is kind of a different one because it's not really didn't have much of an impact on the United States except for maybe extreme eastern New England and parts of Cape Cod. But I grew up in New England, and the nor'easters are the storms that got me interested in meteorology, and every year I try to work one of those in the memory list because they're just so fascinating. Even to this day, I'm in my happy place doing a map analysis of a coastal system, say off Delmarva or New Jersey, deepening rapidly. And this particular system wasn't typical of a coastal nor'easter in that it was well offshore, and well offshore because the area that the frontal zone in which you could get this type of development to occur was shunted farther east, perhaps because of that deep cold air over the eastern United States. This system dropped over 50 millibars in 24 hours. Kind of the definition of a cyclone bomb is about 1 millibar an hour for 24 hours. This system doubled that, dropping to about 950 millibars east of Cape Cod. Just an incredible system and storm to watch on the surface analysis from Ocean Prediction Center, on the buoy data that was coming in from offshore, some wave heights up to 50 feet, wind speeds up to 100 knots. I mean, essentially it was a winter mid-latitude cyclone hurricane, wind field comparable to Sandy. And you get these every once in a while, and it was just an amazing meteorological memory for 2014. So on to number 4. Unfortunately, the tornadoes return. They always seem to do around this time of year. This was April 27th and 28th of 2014, the first high risk that SPC issued during the year across Arkansas on that Sunday afternoon. Arkansas was hit by the first EF4 tornado of the year. In fact, the small town of Bologna took the brunt of that. And Bologna has a dubious distinction similar to Moore, Oklahoma, in that it's been struck quite often. This is the 5th tornado to strike Bologna since 1950, and they got hit again on Sunday, April 27th. And that was the first day of a multi-day severe weather outbreak. Of course, the next day, you know well, there, Mississippi and Alabama bearing the brunt of numerous long-track violent tornadoes. It was a bad day on the 28th. In fact, the 23 tornadoes recorded in Mississippi on Monday, April 28th, 2014, makes it the 3rd largest tornado outbreak in Mississippi history, or in the records, in the modern record. And also, interesting statistic and rather sad one, that there were, I believe, 19 tornado fatalities on the 27th, and I believe 15 fatalities on the 28th, making it the first time since November of 1992 with 2 consecutive days having more than 10 tornado fatalities on each day. So that's quite a remarkable event there. You thought, you know, it seemed to me that that would have occurred more often, especially in recent years, but that's not something that happens very often. So bad couple of days there on a multi-severe weather outbreak, which actually ended or tailed off with event number 5, which is what I titled the Gulf Coast Soak. Incredible rainfall rates as the frontal system responsible for severe weather on the 27th and 28th stalled along the Gulf Coast, basically from Mobile through Pensacola on the 29th through the beginning of May. Just incredible thunderstorms, repeat thunderstorm development over the same area of the Gulf Coast, a tremendous amount of moisture influx from the Gulf of Mexico, and numerous rainfall records being shattered down there from this system. Nearly 2 feet of rain was the max over 24 hours. Pensacola had 6 inches of rain in 1 hour. The ASOS went down because of a power outage there. They had to estimate the daily rainfall. I believe it was close to about 18 inches there. Mobile had a new record, or a 12 inches in 24 hours, the 3rd greatest daily rainfall since 1871. And when you think that this wasn't even a tropical weather system, that's a memorable event. On to number 6. We're on the home stretch. I titled number 6, and I didn't even know this until just a week or so ago. I titled number 6 Nebraska Nasty. Well, do you know what Nebraska's state motto is?
No.
It's Nebraska Nice. And I kind of turned that one around and had no idea. How coincidental. But it was a nasty June in Nebraska. And by all accounts, they just had more than their fair share of nasty, severe storms. In fact, the 10-year average for June tornado days, where you have an F1 or stronger tornado reported in the month of June in Nebraska, over the 10-year period is about 2 days. There's 2 days every June with at least an F1 or greater tornado occurring. In June 2014, there were 4 of those days, so double that. A normal June, also over the last 10 years, has 2-inch or greater, and this is, you know, pretty good size hail reported on 5 days during a normal June. Well, they had 10 days in which 2-inch or greater hail was reported in June 2014. So basically, their level of severe weather activity during the month of June was about double the 10-year average. They had 4 EF4 tornadoes occur on June 16th. Unfortunately, fatalities with those, and the most memorable ones are probably the twin tornadoes, and the Pilger being hit with the downtown being considerably damaged. And then back up a little bit, on June 3rd, they had an amazing number of large hail events, long track, large hail swaths across the eastern part of the state. And some of this hail, large hail up the size of baseballs being driven by 80-mile-an-hour winds. That is not a good day, and that is why number 6 is labeled Nebraska Nasty. On to number 7. The 7 was kind of an interesting one that I got the feeling that the summer was unusually cool. It was very comfortable in many parts of the country during the summer, and one exception being the West Coast. But for most of the continental United States, the summer seemed unusually cool. Well, I went back again using the reanalysis data to look at the continental U.S. temperature record over the last 36 years, almost a 4-decade period of detailed records now. And I looked at June, July, and August every day. And it turns out that, and if you look at the NC National Climate Data Center data, the month of, or the summer months of June, July, and August were just about normal across the continental U.S. And my analysis of the North American regional reanalysis data does show that indeed it was a normal summer. So I kind of thought, well, why did it seem so much different, so cool? And if you look just 2 summers ago to the summer of 2012, which I call the summer from hell, because it was unbelievably hot. In fact, numerous all-time records as far as the reanalysis data go were set during the summer of 2012. And when you compare the summer of 2012 to the summer of 2014, temperature-wise, 2014 is downright comfortable and almost, looks well below normal. But 2012 was anything but normal. The summer of 2014 was normal. So an interesting analysis there. It's all a matter of perspective, right? It's all our memories fool us sometimes, and that's why I put the talk together so I can go back in a few years and go, oh yeah, that's right, that's what happened. But as I mentioned earlier, the West was, and we talked about the drought in California, we talked about the summer. The West was unusually warm all year long, and that results in event number 8, being Western wildfire facts. I looked at the 3 Western states, Washington, Oregon, and California, certainly stretched resources to the limit there as far as the response that was required for numerous fires. And most of the largest fires, 3 of the 4 largest fires in those western states were actually started by lightning. In the mid-July period, there was a lightning bust, they call it, which is essentially lightning with very little precipitation, rapidly moving storms across parts of Washington and Oregon, and ignited some fires. The largest U.S. fire for the year was called the Buzzard Complex, almost 500,000 acres. That was in eastern Oregon. The second largest wildfire of the year was the Carlton Complex. That went over 250,000 acres. And those 2 were both ignited or started by lightning. The Happy Camp Fire you may have heard about through the summer months. That was in Northern California, about 130,000 acres. It was also a lightning start. I believe that was a lightning start in August. And then, unfortunately, the King Fire, which was just west of Lake Tahoe area, grew to about 100,000 acres. That was actually arson. Those are the 4 largest western fires this year. And if you total up the acreage burned just from those 4 fires, you get an area about the size of the state of Rhode Island. So those are just those 4. There were many other fires. And in fact, the average fire size for the summer of 2014, the preliminary size at about 300 acres, which doesn't seem very large, but it is large. If you look at the last decade or so, it's the second largest average fire size over the last 13 years, according to the National Incident Fire Center. So it was a busy season, and not only is it stretching resources as far as firefighting goes in the western U.S., the amount of smoke and haze and poor air quality played a big role as far as impacts, especially in those areas that depend on some income from tourism and those beautiful areas of the West. A lot of people go to see the views. Well, there weren't many views this summer with a lot of smoke in the air. So that was number 8. Number 9 was added after I left number 9 and number 10, as question marks when I put the talk together for the National Weather Association meeting in October, because I kind of just ran out of interesting events, and I thought, well, you know, we've got another few months to go here. I usually leave 10 open, but this year I just left 9 and 10. And I'm kind of glad I did, because we've had a few events to choose from. And number 9, I think nobody would be surprised that I would add November to number 9, because it was a remarkable month on both the temperature and the Great Lakes lake effect snow events that occurred. It was the second coldest November in the 1979 to 2014 reanalysis data set. Only November 2000 was colder in that data set by about half a degree over the continental U.S. Some of the maps are remarkable. I mean, just really anomalously cold air for the month of November. I saw an interesting statistic just this morning. I don't know. I believe the source, so I think it's accurate, that the first half or most of November in Kansas City was about an average temperature of about 39.5 degrees, which is actually what December has averaged so far. So very similar to December weather, but coming in November. And also very similar to what occasionally occurs in December, but came early this year, was the epic lake effect snow downwind, especially Lake Erie, but also all the lakes got in on this. Northern parts of Michigan, northern Wisconsin, parts of western New York, western PA, hammered by numerous lake effect snow events. But really the winner there is an epic band that's set up just south of the Buffalo metro area and just pummeled and buried the suburbs out there just south of the Buffalo area. Just incredible to watch that evolution, and that almost the atmosphere gets into some steady state convection, almost a back building MCS made of snow. And 2 of those waves occurring with nearly 7 feet of snow falling in the epicenter of that event, and quite a disaster as far as recovery. Also some roof collapses, and also the misconceptions of politicians coming in that one as well.
There's an understatement.
So, yeah, it happens. So that was highlighted as event number 9. And okay, so here we are on to 10, and you know, I kind of decided what I wanted to do for number 10 a couple of weeks ago, and I feel a little bad about California because that event was pretty remarkable. They got that reprieve with a major West Coast storm, which could certainly be an honorable mention. But as I started to put the year-end records together for the tornado activity in the U.S., I had to put number 10, and again, this is out of chronological order, but not really, because we sum up the tornado record as the year closes, and it's a near-record low level of tornado activity. I hope I'm not jinxing that, although it would take quite a bit to get anywhere near normal. The year looks like it's going to end with well under 1,000 tornadoes. The normal's probably somewhere around 1,200, but what is normal? That's another issue as far as the tornado record goes. The record is fraught with problems, and it's difficult to say this is an all-time record. I told Jason Same now, the Washington Post Capital Weather Gang, that I would prefer to make this sort of say something along the lines of, that this is one of the least active years for tornadoes in the modern record. And we have other ways of looking at that, but not really actual tornadoes. We can look at environmental data. Again, as you probably realized by now, I rely on the North American Regional Reanalysis to do a lot of historical context work. We can look at some of the environments in which tornadoes form, and we can compare those environments, past and present. This year does not look to be as lacking in environmental ingredients as, say, 1987. 1987 was probably the most inactive as far as tornado ingredients go. And I would say that 1987 is kind of the negative analog to 2011, because 2011 is the hyperactive year. And so we have these 2 extremes. I don't think 2014 is necessarily falling in the lowest of the low, but it's certainly been inactive. But how inactive is a difficult thing to define, because we have measuring challenges with respect to tornadoes. But it's fine with me. I'd much rather talk about snowstorms and other interesting weather events than tornadoes. But that's my business. So, and I don't think they're going away. So don't let your guard down. These things have a tendency to crop up and give us a hard time, and I'm sure they'll do that again. So that's what I'm going to go with for number 10, guys and gals. And I appreciate the invitation to present to the group today, and always a pleasure talking with the good folks on WeatherBrains.
I think we need to start a new tradition with Greg. Now we're going to make Greg forecast the top 10 events of 2015.
There we go. Now we're talking.
Yeah, there you go.
So that would only introduce bias. So,
so Greg, is this the least active year of all your talks that you've given so far?
Well, it is interesting that I got to number 9 and I kind of ran out of interesting weather. So I'd have to say it's definitely, it was a challenge to come up with the events, and I've done this talk just takes way too much time. I don't know why, but I try to tell a story with these events, and I'll sometimes start on something that I think is interesting, but I can't find the story, I can't find the angle, and I'll have to throw that one out and go with something else. This year, it was one of those years where there's plenty to talk about, and it never fails. I'll give this talk or presentation, and somebody will say, well, what about this and what about that? And that's why I give this disclaimer at the beginning. These are my memories. Yours could be different.
So it was a slow year for Diane Sawyer, James. She didn't have as much to talk about.
Well, you wouldn't know it watching their newscast.
Yeah, exactly. now, Greg, have you ever had an event in Hawaii? Has that ever made your list?
No, Alaska has. There was wildfire activity in Alaska. I can't remember what year that was. Hawaii, I don't believe so.
Well, you may have jinxed yourself because they just issued a flash flood warning for Maui. So hopefully that won't become the 11th item today. Now, Greg, you always mention the North American reanalysis. Talk about what that is for our listeners that might not know about that. Sure.
What we're constantly looking for as atmospheric scientists is truth. Aren't we all? It may not just be the weather, but what we're trying to understand is the state of the atmosphere as best we can. Temperature, pressure, wind. Believe it or not, these things are very difficult to measure, and even more difficult to measure accurately, and even more difficult to archive accurately. So what the North American Regional Reanalysis attempts to do, and it's one of many data sets that are called reanalyses, is archive the state of the atmosphere to the best of our measuring ability, but in fact it's a model. It's nothing more than a model, but it's an early forecast. So essentially you're looking at model information with a forecast range of 0. It's not a forecast really, it's the current state. When we look at computer models, every model is initialized with what we think are the current conditions. And this is just an archive of those current conditions back to 1979, every 3 hours. And there are warts in this data set. But as far as detailed atmospheric environmental information, it's about as good as we've got. But whenever I use it, you have to make sure it's, you look at it as a gridded data set. It is not truth, but then again, what is?
Exactly. So it's gridded to 2.5 kilometers, Greg?
No, that one is about a 32-kilometer grid. That is essentially the ADA grid. And the idea there was that you come up with a static framework in which to incorporate the data from balloons, from satellites, surface observations, and you leave this framework static as you continue to move forward in time. And so the data set is updated in almost real time, although unfortunately they stopped in October because they had some problems crop up, and the data actually ended this year in October, and we're hoping to get the reanalysis back and updated through the current time, probably sometime early in 2015. Now there are other reanalyses out there. There are global reanalyses. The North American is obviously not a global reanalysis. It's a very large domain over North America, but there are global reanalyses from the European Center, from National Center for Environmental Prediction, the NCAR reanalysis. Japanese Meteorological Agency has a reanalysis, and all of these data sets can be used to kind of put things in some historical perspective. But they also require an enormous amount of processing and disk space. And I've got another computer in the room that's actually still downloading reanalysis data from the reanalysis, and I'll probably do that till I die. It's a large data set. Very large data set, keeps getting bigger all the time.
So, Greg, you talked about in the 1987 story about whether this was a near record event, but you talked about 1987 including the least ingredients. Which ingredients do you look at to make that claim?
Well, from the North American regional reanalysis, what we have is we have instability, we have CAPE, convective available potential energy. That we have convective inhibition, which is a measure of instability as well, but negative inhibition, a measure of the capping inversion, if you want. We have wind information, so we can measure shear, both on the deep layer from the surface up to, say, 500 millibars in height. We also have the 0 to 3 kilometer storm relative helicity from the data. So I've actually looked at those three components, and also those three components combined into what we call at SPC the supercell composite parameter to understand environments favorable for rotating thunderstorms, organized thunderstorms, come up with an index called the supercell composite parameter day. And if you look at the average number of supercell composite parameter days for the month of March, April, and May, you come up with about a third of the days, about 30 to 40 days during that 92-day period, have a 24-hour average value that would support organized thunderstorms if there were to be thunderstorms in that environment. And then you can compare that just like we do with temperature, you can compare that average to particular years. So we can take an anomaly of 2011, or we can take an anomaly of 2014 or 1987. And what's fascinating about the 36-year data set is we have these years like 1987 and 2014 that show very, very low levels of supercell composite days. They're anomalously quiet. And then you have a year like 2011, which is just off the charts, very, very active. I think the average was maybe 20 days above normal. So out of the 90-day period, you had probably 50 days in which you had, in some area of the domain, where you had supercell composite parameter numbers of 1 or better on average.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I have those maps. I'm still tweaking them, but when you look at the maps, you go, wow, 2011 really stands out, and so does 1987.
So Greg, we're a couple of months into the changes that you guys have enacted at SPC with the risks and other things. Talk about the response so far and feedback you've received on the changes that have been made.
Overall positive. From what I can tell, we have not issued a moderate yet, or anything higher. I think we had an enhanced. I think I actually issued a small enhanced area back in late November across the southeast. I think the real challenge is going to be those bigger days where you're just going to have a lot of lines on the map. You're going to have a lot of lines. Now, those lines correspond to numbers that have always been there. And so from a probability point of view, it really hasn't changed. It's the categorical outlook that has. And hopefully that won't be too confusing for folks. But the underlying information has not changed fundamentally. But we have yet to see, the full use of the range of scales that are out there. And the day 4 through 8 has changed as well. Now there you will see some changes more often because the threshold for the longer range forecast has been dropped lower. The threshold that was being sort of used by forecasters for a day 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 forecast was a 30% probability of severe on the verification day. We've lowered the threshold now to 15%, or what I would consider a slight risk, which I think you will result in more outlooks in the day 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 time frame. I think that's fine. I actually think the science has moved to a point where we can be relatively confident on big events around day 4 through 6, but it's still very, very shaky as far as the lower end events. You know, I won't say marginal, but the events that kind of run of the mill severe weather episodes on day 4, 5, 6. The problem being too specific with those forecasts is more often than not you end up with the severe weather, but it's not in the area you think it's going to be 4 or 5 days out. You know, weather systems, you see this constantly. Weather systems either move faster than forecast or slower than forecast, and so that shift that occurs between day 4 and day 1 makes it problematic for you to be too confident in those extended forecasts.
Hey, Greg, we joked about it earlier about giving us the top 10 for 2015, but I know you get it, and I do too, and probably everybody on the panel does. How do you answer the question, the inevitable question lots of people out there listening and watching have right now? Okay, well, what about next year? What are you seeing? Is there anything at all that we can look at to say, well, the tornado activity is going to be higher? I know how I usually answer the question, but I'm looking for more advice. So what's your answer to that?
Well, it's not that we're not working on this. I've actually just got the confirmation this morning that we'll be having our third workshop on seasonal prediction for severe coming up in March with research meteorologists at the Climate Prediction Center, also from Purdue, also from Columbia University. And I actually am involved in a research project using the climate forecast system guidance to try to anticipate the character of the month ahead with respect to severe weather. And I've been working on this now for 2 years using the CFS guidance, because the goal here would be to try to give some anticipation of, are we going to see levels of activity, quote, above or below what is considered normal? And that's the real challenge. So what if I did tell you that April of 2015, what could how does that benefit? I'm not really sure what the benefits are if we could say something like that, and I don't think we're anywhere near being able to say it with any kind of accuracy. But you don't know if you don't try, and I think we are looking into trying to utilize some of the extended forecast guidance in a way that could give us insight into the level of severe weather activity out farther in advance without, there's no way that we're going to be too specific with this, but maybe we can say something about activity levels. We know that, I knew in 2011, I think it was January or February of 2011, we knew that we were in a very strong La Nina. We knew that large-scale pattern would most likely favor increased storminess across the southeast, Midwest parts of the United States, and that it was quite possible that we would see above normal levels of severe weather as we went into March and April, given the numbers for the intensity of the La Nina cool phase of ENSO. And so we know that there are these large-scale impacts, but they only explain a very small part of the overall severe weather events. But they give us enough insight, I think, to say, be prepared. We also know that, ENSO, the warm phase of ENSO, which we kept thinking would appear this year but did not, that actually almost made the list, but I didn't really have enough information to go on there. If you're in the warm phase or the El Nino phase, there's work that has shown that it could be quite active along the Gulf Coast and across Florida during the winter months, January, February, March, for severe weather activity. Again, you can't be too specific, but you could say, we're in this large-scale influence that could mean more days where you're going to hear sirens or more watches, more rainfall in certain areas as well. Be prepared. So it's not standing still. You know that, Rick. I mean, this science is moving forward at rapid advances, and not that we're going to perfect our forecasts, especially in the extended range, anytime soon, but we are going to continue to collect an amazing amount of insight, I think, into how the atmosphere works and where we're going.
Fascinating work, Greg. It's always a pleasure to listen to you talk. In fact, I've got in front of me my notes from the NWA meeting where I was listening to your top 8, I guess it was at that time. What strikes me as being really interesting in this whole idea of looking at conditions that would be responsible for severe weather, the event that's taking place this week, which is a highly amplified flow pattern. I've been thinking about this, and I know that there's actually been some work done in the recent literature if we could categorize the nature of the meridional flow prior to an outbreak of severe weather, and then look at that over the last, I don't know, 35 years, like you were saying. Is there a signal there?
Well, there is, but again, it's just a small part of the puzzle, right? And I often, it's like you look at one aspect of the puzzle and you might miss something else. And just looking at supercell composite parameter days, I realized there's clearly something we're not accounting for in any measure. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we don't really know the true state of the atmosphere. And we think we do, but there are so many gaps in the observational record. We don't really know all of the ingredients required for tornado events. We know the characteristics that the atmosphere displays, certainly during these events, but because of the nonlinearity of the atmosphere, just because the atmosphere showed some pattern a few days prior to a severe weather outbreak doesn't mean it can't show that pattern prior to a few days of nothing, right? And so whenever you look at analogs, you're like, oh, look what happened 3 or 4 days prior to the severe weather event. I always ask, well, how many times does that happen when you have not had severe weather? And the problem is you bias your analogs by looking at severe weather events and not null cases. There are many more null cases than there are outbreaks, and that's another problem. The atmospheric record is dominated by null cases, and we don't give that enough. We don't think about that deeply enough before jumping to conclusions. Like we've got the answer. No, you don't.
Great point.
Hey, Greg, tell us about phased array radar. When's it going online, operational? We'll be dead by then, probably, won't we?
We're poor. It's very expensive. I think that's one of the real challenges with that radar is that it's a very expensive system, right? Rick may know better than I. The last number I heard was something like. And it may have come down in price by now, but I heard something like $10 million a radar. We're probably going to see advances at the satellite level in terms of lightning and detection capabilities from geostationary satellites prior to any kind of national implementation of phased array. But I don't know. I'm not making those decisions at that level. I'll stick with the top 10.
Greg, if you'll get them after Christmas, they come down about 40%. So just to let you know.
Exactly. One observation, Greg, on the new categories. I will tell you this from my social science studies in the local Target stores. I really do think that people, at least where I am, they're struggling with slight and marginal. People seem to think that marginal represents a higher severe weather risk than slight. And I don't know why, but I have learned that since we've had this little situation going on here today on the 23rd. So
really?
for whatever
so
that
the
means.
Marginal is bearing more attention than a slight risk. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. When people hear the word slight, they just think there's hardly any chance, and marginal is a higher threat. And I'm surprised. I would not think that, but it seems like most people have. And one more quick question. Your WCM page on the SPC site is mind-boggling good. How much of this do you do manually, or is this automated? Who puts this stuff together? Is it all you?
Yeah, ask my wife. Oh my goodness! I just do this. It's like I'm hacking here. I took the week off, and I worked all weekend on severe weather climatology. So I think I got the tornado map out last week because I wanted to get that summarized. And I've got the WeatherWise article. We do the WeatherWise article every year. The Almanac issue, and she just emailed me recently and said, time to start thinking about getting that done. Of course, this year's WeatherWise tornado summary will probably be, one pager. There's not a lot, but I'm yeah, I'm a little obsessive. I go through periods, once in a while I'll say, okay, I'm done with that for now, but I can't leave it alone. And it's fascinating. And like I said, I mean, it's really remarkable when you think about, one, the progress that's been made in modern meteorology, two, the computing capability that can be brought to bear on these large data sets, and three, where we're going. I mean, it's just full speed ahead. There's more information. There's more ways to analyze that information. And they're more, that it's deep down, the longer range stuff is an insurmountable problem because there are limits to predictability. But every once in a while an event comes along that is actually quite predictable, and you can hang your hat on that one, but just keep in mind that there's going to be those surprises that you're going to look back on and hopefully try to learn from, but there's still going to be surprises for years to come.
Well, and I'll say this is a problem for us because once we get on that thing, it's like we spend hours looking at this stuff. I mean, it's just like you don't want to put it down. So it's a problem.
Well,
it's a problem for all of us, but that is a marvelous thing. And again, we're not going to do the regular segments. We never do it on the year ender. But I think the pick of the week of the show ought to be the WCM page at SPC. And one more question, and we'll wrap things up because I know we're busy. A lot of things are happening, but. Greg, one of the things I see from the local Weather Service offices, it's a little bit of personality in their social media feeds, and I'll kind of point at Rick Smith here as a good example, and not only Rick's personal Twitter account, but his account that he's part of maintaining at the Weather Service in Norman, where there's a little interactivity and people can ask questions and they're getting answers. It seems like the SPC main Twitter account is still mostly automated data. There's not that human touch. Do you see it staying that way? Do you think you're going to lean more towards some interactive stuff?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit before about social media and the demands it places on everyone. I enjoy it personally. It is interesting. We have guidelines that say you can do this and you can't do that, and you have to keep in mind where your professional life is. I have a really difficult time with meteorology because, like I said, I'm doing it all the time. I kind of draw that line that if I'm heavily utilizing SPC resources to generate the information, well, then it's SPCs, it's the government. If I'm doing a lot of stuff on my own, then I don't have a problem tweeting it as a personal meteorologist. The short answer is yes, that there is this push to become more focused on social media with respect to the SPC. We're talking about social media shifts during big events. I don't know if somebody's on that shift today, tweeting content out. But the answer is that that's been recognized. I always find it rather interesting though, because social media is a very personal thing, and I have a personal Facebook page, and I find it difficult for federal agencies to be too personal, and so I have a hard time with the idea that the SPC is going to be your friend and converse with you as I would perhaps in a Twitter or a Facebook conversation. And so how do you manage that? That's a big challenge, and it's not one that I have an answer to, but they are moving in a direction where we want to try to become a little more personable. From a institutional perspective, which almost seems like a contradiction to me.
Yeah, hey, Rick, how would you answer that question? Because again, I see the Weather Service offices are starting to become more interactive. Like, somebody wished me a Merry Christmas from a Weather Service office, and I'm not going to say which one because I want to get somebody in trouble.
Yeah.
But it just seems like I will tell you this. Like with our television station main Twitter account, when they get responses and it's more personable, it's more intimate, and they want to follow that, and they latch onto the information better. Rick, how would you answer that question with the local Weather Service in Norman?
Yeah, I agree that it does increase interest, it does increase followers, and they're more likely to come back. But I also agree with Greg that it's a challenge. I mean, we have a staff of 12 meteorologists that work shifts here, and they're all different, and some are more social than others, and it's hard to keep that continuity or that same level of service with every person with every shift. The one person comes in, he's very chatty, another person comes in that's not. So maintaining that is very difficult. I think it's important, and when we can do it, obviously there's going to be times when we can't, but I have, like you, noticed more of that going on in the Weather Service. I've noticed more of it going on at the SPC too. SPC has done a lot more in the last, I'd say, 6 months to a year of having, a live tweeting or a tweet chat type of thing where people can ask questions and interact, and Greg said starting the social media shows for the big events. So I think there's some big strides that have been made in that area. So I agree with you. It's important to do it. It's not always easy to do it. It's hard to tell somebody, hey, be personable and be nice and chat with these people, but don't chat with these people. Just chat, but only if you have time, and only if So it gets very complicated. But I think the Weather Service is doing a good job of trying.
Bill, are you waving at us? What does that mean? I'm seeing this thing here.
That was a Carol Burnett thing. So anyway, I had something that I was going to ask Greg, but you made me forget what it was, James. So thank you very much. Anyway.
No, Bill was over there making these odd hand gestures. I was afraid I was in trouble or something. Usually when I see on television, you see some guy in the studio doing that, you've gone over your time limit. They want you to shut up. So I was just immediately gearing up to stop talking. So sorry. No, but we do need to wrap up. We've kept Greg here a long time, and it's again, we are doing this as the year ender, but we are recording it right before Christmas. Everybody is busy with family time. So, Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. It's an honor having you here, and we always look forward to this. And great work, and just keep it up.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody, and we'll do it again in 2015.
Hey,
Happy New Year.
We'll do it. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everybody. Typically, we do the shows here on Monday nights at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. You can watch it live at live.bigbrainsmedia.com, but we know most of you listen via the podcast route, via your favorite podcast client. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. Aubrey Urbanowitz will be back next week with the email segment. Our social media accounts are on the website. And Brian, plug that newsletter thing one more time. Give us a big plug. Go.
Yes, go to the WeatherBrains website, weatherbrains.com, and scroll down a couple of episodes, and you'll see a special announcement. Starting in middle of January, we're going to start a newsletter called Sky Writings, and you can subscribe to it. It's through MailChimp. We won't sell the mail list to anybody. We'll just use it for ourselves, and it asks you to put in your zip code just so we have some idea where people are listening.
There you go. So be sure and sign up for the newsletter. On behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a happy New Year, and God bless.
Bye, everybody.
Merry
thanks,
Christmas.
guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. It was great.
Merry
Merry Christmas, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.